Welcome to the mini proposal workshops. But looking at this data, the hard part is that it doesn't really give us a very clear direction. Well, from one meeting, we get more like a technical side. From community meeting, we got the collaboration side. Here is we thought creating meeting summary is important, but community thought meeting minutes is important. Either way, the underlying issue we have is that we still don't have a clear direction we should pick, because from one side we get like, let's do collaboration. On between us, we couldn't decide should it be dashboard or AI bot. But in order to effectively continue, we should make a decision today to scope down on one of these, because if we take this huge solution that we create an AI like infrastructure where we put AI on that and we train that and then we use that and like have collaboration and all that in the mix, this project could be like years. And even this research space where we're just trying to get all the information out is like very exhausted and very like long. What are we going to do with the solution distillation to one single component?
It does sound like the community has started like flocking towards the knowledge management side of it. So,
and by knowledge management, you mean training data? Or
more like what we're training it for. So like the feature set and the ML models and so forth that we would build would be scoped within the context of knowledge management, potentially. Because there's a few, pillars or feature sets that I could see potentially being broken out. And one of them is knowledge management. The other one's like community collaboration tools. And then meeting insight is kind of another one. So, which some of these categories do break out, like audio dissemination would kind of be the meeting aspect of it. Dashboard would potentially be knowledge management side, and then community collaboration has its own section. So is that kind of like the guardrails? Am I understanding the scope of this right? Or
my expectation actually was that we take one of these orange ones, and if we take like, okay, let's do a bot, we don't actually touch community collaboration at all. And not that there won't be a community collaboration, but when I think about community collaboration, I think you have series of workshops, you have people who will be there, who will facilitate, who will take notes and kind of aggregate the feedback, and then basically what we are doing here, and kind of teach people why we are doing this AI tool and how we are going to do that without doing it.
I see. Yeah, and I feel like some of that's going to be needed. The community collaboration tools, they kind of rely on and have dependency on some of the other ones, to be honest. So like for it to be valuable, how I see community collaboration is providing consensus tools, conversation tools like a forum, ways to distribute information, but see that information's collected by the meeting, capture, and it's stored in the knowledge management system. So, you know what I mean? They kind of almost all rely on each other. And I'm trying to visualize how could we extract that scope and then build specifically for that without requiring some of the other ones.
Yeah, for me, the community collaboration would have been just an educational site without tooling, and more like describing the tools we want and creating like that research material but not thinking about building the solution set. The building part of like the knowledge management, if you want to tackle that side first, that will be a dashboard side. And I wouldn't include community collaboration in that. Here I would go like, okay, like actually go into describing in proposal how will the website look like, and the end result will be a website where you can integrate stuff and basically have a way to get data in, but nothing is done with the data. The person itself, perhaps there is a way to export the data out, but there is no utility on that. It's just a place where you can gather all the stuff in a format that could be used in future buildings. On the training data side, it will be all the lessons, or like this probably would be similar to community collaboration in a sense that having these ideation stages where you just collect data, you go into community trying to pull out who wants to share their data, and more of like an education of how would you do that in an open source manner, and basically teaching how to use the model. But the usability of that isn't something everybody could spin up, because you don't create the front end where you just pull the service, but this is the full version of like, if you are the full developer and you will, how would you then like find the data, how do you reason with it, how do you actually drain it, and then how do you test it? But all of that could be in this operational space where these developers just use their command lines and do these executions. But the normal user wouldn't really know how to go about that. And then final, but in this here, you because you will have to do the training data anyway, but that's more like closed source. You don't do documentation around that. It's more like, this is the data we're going to use. It's decided more centralized. This is, and you put your own energy into getting a result out, basically, or a service that isn't related to any dashboard or anything. And it's more like a ChatGPT, basically, service that you have one place which is already trained with an information, but you can prompt with information. And then you kind of document around that, like what it took to build that. And that would be kind of it for the proposal. But that would be then just that feature proposal that you can prove that this is useful. But once you build a family of these different stuff, then the next step would be like, okay, we have this bot now. Do you want to learn how did we create that bot? Like, how do we train that bot? Or do you want to learn, how do you want to make it more seamless, like integration, like instead of you manually copy pasting stuff into the prompt and getting information out? Do you want a service now that is able to automatically gather you through integrations, the data, and then we integrate that bot into that in a seamless way? Or we have that bot now, and then have this education of, it's an awkward that this kind of situation, it always needed, but on other terms, we could think of what other communities could take on, because these three are something that you have like special skill about, but probably there is somebody who could also step in and build a component. And if all of these would then build like not the finished product, but the point is not to get the finished product, but get part of that product done.
So our intention is to we want to build on the open source community and build out our business model that thrives in that type of environment. So a lot of these solutions, we're hoping to partner with existing solutions. So maybe Summon, Clarity DAO, GeniusX, some of their tools, and integrate that. So maybe it's the consensus mechanism, maybe it's the way to vote, maybe, maybe it's a smart contract that records a conversation on chain. So it's collecting some of these existing solutions and building it into our tool. So we're hoping to leverage some of that instead of reinventing how do people govern themselves, how do communities operate. There's a lot of research out there that's been done, Little Fish and all of them, and try to maybe partner with them so we can share knowledge and figure out how do we just adapt this and plug it in to our tool. So I don't know if that changes, the roadmap at all, but that is what we're hoping to do for some of the aspects.
That probably moves us into the direction of dashboard, because then that gives you the most like connectivity with other projects to integrate with. Basically, then the idea is simply, how do you collect the data and store it and share it? Because when we talked about taking a dashboard, then main focus was expected how the data sharing consensus works. And if you look at the feedback session, then all of them kind of were quite equally. So, but yeah, equally the same things, I would say. There was an addition on top here that visualizing of context is something, a map of ideas, a map of structures that people would want to see. So these would be the 4 main things you will be working on. But yeah, that wouldn't include the AI unless there is an integration that already does that. But yeah, this will be more about how do you store your data and get data in.
Oh man, this is tricky because the sharing part falls under the community collaboration. Like that, it would be in the dashboard, but it would be represented by the dashboard, but then it's its own thing. Community collaboration is how do you share this knowledge or this insight to your community? How do you govern that? Who, is it private? Is it public? Is anybody allowed to contribute? And that would require, some form of identification, authentication, DIDs, NFTs, tokens, which fall under dashboard and integration pieces. So just don't know how to make a proposal that stands on its own as far as like I said, a feature set where it's even attractive, because without the others, there's not much utility to it. There's not much value to it unless we do a giant proposal and we're calling to action the communities to see if they can break apart the proposal and build particular tools that we then integrate, and that's our proposal. Or I don't know. I mean, I'm following you and I agree we should scope it down. We need to scope it down. But then by doing so, the tool loses its utility, if that's making any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, but in the end, we do describe the big vision, even for the small proposal. Let's say we start from the dashboard and we say this is the starting point of that infrastructure where we integrate and figure out basically the consensus mechanism, how the information is shared. And the next step on the roadmap is this second proposal, which is about training data. Or maybe you put training data and AI, but they do like the same. bucket. And this would already kind of give you now that needed like sexiness, like we mentioned before, that it finally does something. But I think it has to be sold on the high level and rewarding the like first step, basically. Because I mean, we could try always, like, even if you have, like, I wouldn't say that don't put the big proposal in. I'm thinking that it's like, in the sake of like the content we're creating right now, it will be so much easier to go with more scoped down version. And secondly, like having, we're gonna have a very undefined expectations and the cost for the speed proposal if we're going to, because we're not gonna go into all the details then, if we just stay on very high level. And then if the price is going to be like $400,000, you cannot compete with other ideas that, I know you can always get, but I know it's like, how to explain? Like, I think the competition is too high for that. To get like an expensive proposal done compared to that you provide like a more step through proposal that doesn't cost that much, but gets to the direction. And if you assume the like constant continuity from proposal, then it's a higher chance that you just have to pace yourself to different funds.
Okay, so a couple questions on that. Easy one first. What have you been observing? Because I've seen these patterns and I've been trying to question that myself, like what is the best direction? We do see reoccurring entities making proposals in the past 5, 6, 7 funds, right? You know, Light Donation is one. They keep coming back. They've built a reputation, so the odds of them succeeding is fairly high. But then you see these small groups that aren't as directly involved in, say, Catalyst or some of the core Cardano communities. And they'll break up their proposal into multiple fund rounds, and then they just lose that traction, or their following or their reputation doesn't seem to take off. And so then they don't get funded in the future. What's your take on using that as a strategy to break it up and step through it? And in the event that we don't get funding, I feel like we have to get funding from somewhere or just stop the project. And unfortunately, that's like not an option. I feel like here, like we're building our livelihood, our financial stability here. So yeah, I'm just concerned with, if we did break it up and step through it, that we don't get funded in one of the fund rounds, and then what happens to the project. But I imagine there's alternatives, you know, Deep Fund and Genius X and all those other accelerator programs.
Yeah, well, from my point of view, if you already get funded once, then, and you kind of put this continuous thing that everybody expects that, oh, next fund, we're gonna get the next stage. Then, and it doesn't get funded, well, I think it falls down to the same thing, like what happens if this big proposal doesn't get funded and you didn't put any small ones there? It's the same question.
Yeah.
Like, does it mean that the full idea is bad, or was it too big to grasp and to kind of trust?
That's a good point. Okay. Then, so now on the second question, just to try to get your feel for it, in your perspective, we slightly talked about it before. what if we did break it up, say dashboard, community collaboration, and then combine training data and the bot side, split them up in different proposals, but each of them are the high level. And then when we talk to KPIs and milestones and expenses, that's scoped down to the individual pillar here or concept here. So our proposal is pitching the high level overall everything. And then when we talk about what we're actually building in our deliverables and stuff, this is carved out. And then we propose all of them in Fund 10 and see which ones stick. However, even in that case, I still feel like the budget we're requesting for here is roughly 400,000, you know, I mean, because each of these are giant. Unless we can break it up even more into more than 3 or 4 proposals. But yeah, what are your thoughts if we did it that way? Like each proposal has the same high level pitch, same high level overview, but then we scope it down to deliverables and milestones specific to that category.
May sound like a spam.
Okay.
But because if it's different proposals, then, well, I would say the detailed or impact can be copy pasted, like the end impact, but I think like the solution and problem statement would be different actually for each of these.
I see. And I agree.
Because then it's just easier for the voter to read. If he's reading like this information, disseminating and documenting meetings are time-consuming activities, and then he goes into that detail and he reads about like visualizing content and sharing that stuff. Well, it adds to that, but it doesn't really automate meeting documentation because we're not doing that. The automation part was actually done by AI, but that's a different proposal.
Although I will say that problem statement is high level, and we can address that problem statement with unique solution statements for the scope. So
Yeah.
I would say community collaboration, you know, the solution statements driven from that would address this particular problem statement. Same with dashboard and the AI component. Both do address the automation or so meeting, the fact that it's time consuming to do meeting documentation and retrieving insights. So the community collaboration is the dissemination of that and the collaboration piece and how the communities coordinate, which is solving the time efficiency, you know, of gathering meeting insights and then providing documentation. Dashboard is a place to go to review all these insights. So that's potentially also solving the same problem statement. Yeah, I'm struggling with breaking it up too much and making them completely independent silos because they're not valuable independently. But if we can speak to, hey, this is how we're solving it in the scope of community collaboration and dashboard and so forth, then it
I
at
would
least
actually
talks to it. Sorry,
wouldn't say that proposals aren't useful separately, because having this kind of dashboard, but I'm imagining like having places, even if this creates like a database, it's still much more than figuring out how can I get information from Discord or Zoom if that dashboard kind of is able to collect that. And right now my data is like, I don't really have that data because it's not receivable in like simple terms. And in dashboard, I assume there is just like click a button, give access, pull data.
Yeah.
And community collaboration, that is obvious win if like you always need educational more stuff, and probably, and if you notice, then like Catalyst does fund a lot of these kind of activities where people do train people, educate them, and create like this kind of collaboration spaces. AI bot, that is like actually the least, even though this is like the best thing in a sense, I think that has like the least impact because it's just one feature, and you might, that has like this, like, okay, why don't we just use ChatGPT? Why you need to make a copy of ChatGPT so that we can know that you know how to integrate stuff or use AI bots? Training data is, I think there is on like already like a lot of workshops, so that's another thing. So these two could be not that useful on their own. Although if you combine that, then it has like this specific value for Catalyst and Cardano. So yeah, in the end, I still feel like we can make it useful for the individual proposals too. We just need to put a bit more thought into how to describe it and plan it. The only issue with that is we probably have to do like this overhead for each proposal, which may add up to like 50 to 100K for nothing, basically, for duplicate work, just to make sure that if any of these proposals do get funded, that they can still be delivered without any of other components being funded. But it will build you a strong case that if you do finish with one and new funding round comes up, then you can already say, we have now dashboard, we want to integrate this, or we have now this AI tool, but we don't have this seamless way to spin it up, or we have this insight from our own community, what we want and how do we want, and now let's use that. Today morning, I had a meeting with Daolens platform, and they shared that they put ChatGPT from 3.5 into their keyword, basically, like the proposal platform. And if people have discussions in their platform, then it can pull the data off, and like you can ask any question. So it had this question and answer query basically built into their.
Yeah, share some info, because that is exactly what we're intending to build as one of the features. There's plenty of features, but that's the primary feature that we're after, is having a ChatGPT-like experience with your knowledge management system. And then the knowledge management system, right, is supposed to consist of practically everything that's going on, whether that's Discord conversations or conversations on the platform, or meetings, right? And like that's all informing the database. So let's see, I'm gonna Daolens, huh? Okay.
So what he showed us was basically the same visual, and asked Robin to summarize this post. Basically, if you click that, it gave prompts what you could ask, but you could also write your own question. And he used that. The Robin was scoped down to basically the information provided by this specific platform. And they had integration with Discord, so some chatting solution where they also pull all the information.
Okay, I mean, this sounds quite similar to what we want to build. Wow, yeah.
Well, perhaps I could invite them to mini proposal workshops and basically throw some insights back and forth. This is an open source project for them too. They just released all their code. The latest versions are always like private until it's ready. So the AI part, I think, is right now is the next step, and this is closed. But they say that they are open source and they're planning. They just have like a way to release stuff. And their issue right now is basically participation. And so they're looking basically feedback and users to actually use and suggest how to improve.
Dude, so how do we collaborate with people like this? Because this is, you know, a good key component to what we want to build. Looks like they've already built out a good infrastructure. They are using what seems to be Notion, or at least the Notion design for knowledge management. Yeah, I really want to dig into these guys deeper. So ours is like, this is one of the components. And then there's a bot joining meetings and then translating and storing that in something like this. Then, you know, integrating conversations, whether it's Discord or whatever, into something like this as well. Then having the AI interface similar to the way they have it with ChatGPT. But we also want to build hard-coded prompts that, you know, the user would actually query that database. But if it's a common thing that we keep seeing, then that's just a feature. It becomes a feature. You click a button and it produces that, you know, with that prompt automatically. So that's kind of the concept. This is the starting framework of what we plan to build. But then, of course, all those other components, the community collaboration, how does the community vote? The bounties, that's part of it. The conversations, that's part of it. And the knowledge management system. So they've got a good framework of what we plan to do. Who are these guys? Are they Cardano?
No, they are Ethereum, but they heard about Cardano last week, or maybe probably they knew about this before. But yeah, there was a collaboration somewhere happened. People met, people saw results of each other, and now we're like, let's align in a way that we also work together in 6 months.
Yeah, no, I'd love to work with them, because like I said, like our idea is to just take all these open source platforms and try to integrate it into a single solution or a single, you know, service offering. And I've seen a few that are open source that we could really get something going pretty quickly if they partnered with us and worked with us to build it. But what's the incentive for them to do so? You know, I mean, we wouldn't be necessarily a customer unless everything's API. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. I could try to see if we could use this Wednesday 16 UTC to get together and basically share that vision of what's the solution described and what they are describing. If they provide that option that we can build on Daolens, basically infrastructure, then it will technically, but no, but it's still different because this doesn't work the same way as probably we're expecting. So that has to be that alignment, but there could be that potential that they are like, okay, they focus on these features because there was so many things there they could turn. But if we can say that on this platform we could build this thing or this component, and that could be the start, because the idea is that they don't finance that, but that the community does. So because we are writing a proposal and work on some, and just not trying to do the duplicate work, and that's, I guess, the only like strategy to be had here. On the community collaboration side, I feel like we kind of already like doing it with this, and if we now include another totally new team, it automatically turns into community collaboration. It's just, yeah, and the proposal there would simply to finance these kinds of facilitations and discussions and turning them like more operational meetings, where the outcome is actually an asset or project-based learning or something similar to that.
Okay. I'd love to meet with them and see what their direction is. Man, there's just so many similarities. It may not make sense that we build out this tool if they've already got something. I mean, I don't, or we build out the other features.
But they are totally on Ethereum. So the like one win you already have is that you have a bunch of Cardano knowledge and how to integrate that. And my assumption that if it is open source as it is, then then already like building a new layer on that is like useful. I mean, it's,
yeah, I honestly see this fitting better in Cardano because the solution, when I dig deep into the details for the governance aspect, voting and bounties and so forth, that would be written in a Hydra head, you know, so a feeless structure, but you still have the security protocols and the foundation of the L1 Cardano layer. That just makes sense to me. Like over any L2 or Ethereum or EVM based blockchain, that's just superior in my opinion. So we plan to build it on Cardano and using Hydra heads, make it feeless. I can see where there's enough separation potentially. So if we focused on the knowledge management aspect and built out the knowledge management and the database and collecting all this data, then this tool could be like the skin. So, okay, we want to extract projects, bounties, courses, communities, you know, and sort of layer that on top of the knowledge management. I can see that, like we would benefit each other potentially.
another strategy, which I think we haven't touched it, is we look at this community collaboration a bit differently and basically choose a client. And like the proposal is all about improving that client operations, which is then basically all these features that you can have and all the dashboard. So, but who will that client be is then my first assumption, what like Catalyst community or IRG or what token holders might vote for is Catalyst Circle, even though they are a bit hard perhaps to kind of work with. But then, I mean, that is the heart of Catalyst in a way that just like a heart of governing Catalyst. Even though they're not yet using that role as that, the way it looks like going, it is going to be something like that. Another option is to support already existing project, which is heavily relying on meetings and like information sharing. Well, one which we have is governance guild, but that would assume that governance guild would have to also get more funding. But now we don't have this like governance challenge setting, so it's hard for us to kind of refinance that. Oh, then technically, then it is like yeah. Except we will still need an operational side to be rewarded in order to pull the DAO stuff. So
yeah, one of our goals is to try to develop this tool built for Catalyst. And yeah, Circle is probably the ones providing us maybe the feedback and the input, but in general, it's meant to capture, you know, everything related to Catalyst, throw it into the knowledge management system, and then provide perspectives. Okay, let's see a view of projects. Let's see a view of challenge teams. Let's see a view of proposals or whatever. And then everything surrounding those concepts are extracted from knowledge management. And so one of our goals is to try to develop a solution specifically for Catalyst. And then anybody who wants to hop in can ask ChatGPT any question about Catalyst. What does it mean? And when's the next fund round? And as long as that's in the knowledge management system somewhere, they can get an answer to their question. However, they are a bit of a unique case. You know, they're not, and then also DAOs. DAOs is a target audience as well. But they would use it differently than Catalyst. Catalyst is a very, very large, you know, entity compared to something like a DAO. But I'd love to work with Catalyst, and if that helps support us getting funded as well, you know, that is ideal.
So yeah, this target specific client, that would be then like project based, basically.
Yeah, essentially like DAO, or. Oh,
and it should be well known already. That's like, else it's like slow. Another thing is, of course, IoG working groups, so that they have this developer experience interoperability, and they basically provide. The way I would actually even see that perhaps that we do some joint proposals, for example, facilitators collective or governance school, that we kind of support specific target meetings or a DAO, if we would choose that. And then when they provide data, we already document and disseminate it in different models as we know, or facilitators use, or governance school as we kind of have prepared. And then they still get the output, they just don't get it automatically. But on the side, your technical team and your like insights are working towards to get that output we are creating from these input materials. And what we provide is like an open source way. How do we do it? How do we kind of use it? And on the other side, you already perhaps could like fast track some stuff that you no longer have to watch the entire video to take notes. You can just put this file into here, run this command, and we can get this like operational activities which are not fully automated, but we kind of get this like into training. How do we use these tools like separately? But in the end, the main goal is that we streamline the entire process at some point, because probably there is going to be a lot of like trial and errors anyway. What works, and maybe there are not all models of documentation that the AI is even able to understand. So there could be like blockers there. But that will be then like, yeah, project-based learning, what this Gimbal Labs is doing. And Gimbal Labs name is also kind of getting more attraction. So, but I don't know, are you building it from under Gimbal Labs, or you're using a separate entity? That could also be like a good argument.
Yeah, so this does kind of come back.
Swarm.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
And yeah, one target audience is also Swarm itself, but I have no clue how they proceed also VR.
But yeah, I'd love to work with Swarm as well. Because they're a good use case, since they're involved in so many different projects, you know, that how can we have one giant knowledge management system, but then carve it out, you know, by that project, Swarm and SingularityNet, Swarm for Catalyst, and all the different working groups that they're in, the D-work board and all that other stuff, carve that out. So we do have our own business, I guess, that's meant to be overseeing this and pursuing this and building this, so that Insight IQ thing that when you asked about, yeah, I can, say that that's where our intention is, that we will build it with the help of the community as well, but we're the ones sort of helping direct it and push forward with it. We may utilize things like, because we do want to build out learning and education for that. So we may utilize something like Gimbal Labs is building an LMS, and we would take advantage of that to produce our own courses potentially, and then get contributors and so forth. But it wouldn't be like Gimbal Labs is designing it for us. They're designing the LMS and we're a client of that LMS for our perspective, our scope, potentially.
What is LMS?
Learning management system. So they're actually building their own version of like Canvas or Skillshare or something like that. So that they're building out a full platform for education. And then we could just, and that's an open source project, and we would just copy it and then produce our own courses essentially. And they're even building the mechanisms in which you coordinate and how you run cohorts, and how do you interact with your learners and progress through the courses, and defining your learning targets. All of that is being developed by Gimbal Labs. So we could definitely take advantage of that. I'm in quite a few working groups building it, but I'm spread too thin.
On another note, thanks for watching Mini Proposal Workshop. And with this, I conclude today's session. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Tivo.